The Geula of the Alter Rebbe on Yutes Kislev was on Yom Shlishi B'Shavua, on a Tuesday, as the Alter Rebbe writes in his famous letter. It was on the day of Yom Shehuchpal B'I Kitov, the day that Kitov says twice, on the third day of the week in Ma'aseh Bereshis, and the creation says twice Kitov. Yutes Kislev, the Alter Rebbe writes, as I was reading in the Sefer Tehillim, the Pasuk, Padav V'Shalom Nafshi, that's when I went out in peace. Says the Rebbe, since the Alter Rebbe himself emphasizes that the Geula was on the third day of the week, the day that Huchpal B'I Kitov, it's understood but simply, obviously, that the toich and the content of the Geula of Yutes Kislev is somehow connected to the idea, to the content of the third day of the week. Says the Rebbe, the explanation is, it's known that Yafutzu Ma'nei Sechel Chutza, the spreading of Chassidus to the outside, started mainly after Petrograd, after this story of the Alter Rebbe being released by Yutes Kislev. Therefore, says the Rebbe, just like we find by Matan Torah generally, that it's connected with the number 3, and specifically in regards to time, the Gemara says that Matan Torah was B'Yom Liso, it was on the third day. There it's referring to the third day after the Yidden preparing for Matan Torah. B'Yarchet Lisoi, it's on the third month, the month of Sivan. Similarly, by the revelation of Pnimiyas HaTorah on Yutes Kislev, that it's first of all in the Chodesh Kislev, which is the third month from the beginning of the year when we count from Tishrei, and also it's on the third day of the week. So what's the connection between this idea of the number 3? Says the Rebbe, we can explain it in the following way. The novelty, the Chidush of Matan Torah was that at that point was nullified the decree that was previously in place, that Elyonim, the upper realms, the spiritual, shouldn't come down, L'Tachtoinim, down into this world. Tachtoinim lo yalu Elyonim, those below should not be able to go up above. And Matan Torah achieved the chibur, the connection between the Elyon, between the upper and the lower. Says the Rebbe, this is hinted in the number 3. Rishai, number 1, represents that there is only one thing right from the outset. In other words, would represent is just a likus. The number 2 represents that there is separation. There's 2 separate things. Like before Matan Torah, there's the Elyon and there's the Tachton. They're 2 separate things, 2 separate worlds. But then Shlishi, number 3, represents the harmony and the synthesis between these 2 things coming together. Says the Rebbe, this is why Torah is also referred to as Shalom, as peace. As the Rambam writes, Kol HaTorah nitnu lasas Shalom bo'olam. All of Torah is to bring peace in the world. Torah is in fact called Shalom, because the whole idea of Shalom is this concept of bringing together 2 things, 2 opposites. Says the Rebbe, the same thing is true with revelation and spreading of Torah Chassidus. Before the Geula of Yutes Kislev, you didn't have this idea that the Ma'ayonos, the well springs of Torah, should spread all the way to the outside. In other words, the well springs would represent that which is like the Elyon, completely above and beyond. The outside could be, first of all, within the person himself, starting from the person's seichel, starting from his intellect. In a certain sense, that's already like outside compared to the essence of his soul, and that which is higher than seichel, as the Rebbe points out over here in the footnotes regarding the idea of emunah, which is completely higher than seichel. So that's the chutzah. There's also the chutzah, the outer part, the outside, in the literal sense. So this idea of learning Torah, of spreading Pnimiyas HaTorah in the most public way, spreading it in every single place to the most distant places, before the Geula of Yutes Kislev, you didn't have that. So again, there's like this separation between the Elyonim, these ideas, the deepest ideas of Torah, and the chutzah, that which is outside. But then comes the Geula of Yutes Kislev, and that achieved Yafutzu Ma'nei Sechel Chutza, like the combination between the Elyon and the Tachton that happened in Matan Torah. Says the Rebbe, the same idea, says the Rebbe, we could explain why it is that the Alter Rebbe connects the Geula with Padav V'Shalom Nafshi. Because that's, again, the whole idea of what Shalom is all about. So we have the explanation why it's on the third day of the week, why the Alter Rebbe emphasizes this idea of the third day of the week, as well as the idea of Padav V'Shalom Nafshi. The Rebbe says with this we can also understand why the Alter Rebbe, in connection to Yutes Kislev, points out that it's the day of Huchpal B'I Kitov, that it says Kitov twice. The Alter Rebbe doesn't just say it was on the third day of the week, he emphasizes this point, Huchpal B'I Kitov. Why is that? Because the doubling of Kitov on the third day, the Gemara says it represents the idea of Tov LaShamayim and Tov LaBriyos. In other words, it's good for heaven and good for people down here. So this idea, this double Tov, is again this chibur of the Elyon and the Tachton, the connection between the upper and the lower. In other words, it's a it's a toiv that's combining and connecting. It's good for both together. Shamayim and Bria is the Elyon and the Tachton. Says the Rebbe, this double good is also emphasized specifically in Chassidus, which demands by the Yid both extremes. On the one hand, Chassidus, Pnimis HaTorah, achieves that the Yid's avodah between him and Hashem should be in the greatest, highest way, which is the idea of like Shamayim, permeated with the well springs of the Torah, with the deepest ideas of Torah. So that's on the one extreme. On the other hand, Chassidus demands the idea of Avas Yisrael to what kind of people? Even, as the Alter Rebbe explains at length in Perek Lamed Beis of Tanya, even to those that are called Briois Ba'alma, in other words, that there might be nothing else that we could say about them, no special qualities, other than the fact that they're created by Hashem. So Chassidus, again, combines the Shamayim, the highest spiritual avodas, but bringing it down and connecting also with those Yidden that are even at the furthest end. Another point, says the Rebbe, the avodah of Chassidus itself is a kind of avodah that's shaykh to, and more than that, it encompasses all Yidden, both those that are on the Shamayim level, on the most spiritual levels, on the highest levels, and even those that are on the Brios level, on lower levels. The Alter Rebbe emphasizes right in the Sharblat, the cover page of the Tanya, that that is, that every single Yid needs to know that it's close for him, Eilecha, it's very, very close to you, it's very near, it's very accessible, the idea of Avodas Hashem. And as the Alter Rebbe immediately continues in the Sharblat, and he elaborates, obviously, much more in the Sefer of Tanya, how a Yid, every single Yid could achieve this, B'derech Haruko, Ktsar, the Alter Rebbe gives a long and short way, how this could all be achieved. So that's on the one hand, that even no matter how far or simple the Yid feels, he's Shaykh to Avodas Hashem. On the other hand, the Alter Rebbe emphasizes that even someone that's on the highest levels of Shamayim already, even someone that avodah for him is already something that became part of his habit, part of his nature, and he's seemingly just cruising along. Nevertheless, if he's just doing it based on his nature, and he's not doing everything to climb higher, to go higher, then says the Alter Rebbe, this person is going to be called lo yavodi, that's not proper service of Hashem yet. A Yid needs to constantly be an oived elikim, really working hard to serve Hashem more than that which he's used to. And says the Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe immediately tells this person that this too is karoi ve'lecha adavar moed. A Yid could think, since he's already on such a high level, the level of Shamayim, how can you demand from me to go even higher? Says the Alter Rebbe that for this avodah you were also given the ability, you were given the koiches to be able to do this, and this too is karev moed for every single Yid. Says the Rebbe, according to this explanation, in the Chiddush of Yutas Kislev, or at least one of the Chiddushim of Yutas Kislev, we could also understand now the connection between the Geula of Yutas Kislev and the Sefer of Tanya. Because we know, says the Rebbe, that the 53 days that the Alter Rebbe was in prison correspond to the 53 prakim of the Tanya. We also know that the Geula of Yutas Kislev was in the merit of the 2 years of Chayis, of Torah and Avodah, that the Tanya had given, that the Tanya had added to the Chassidim. Because Tanya is printed 2 years before the Geula of Yutas Kislev. And that's what the Alter Rebbe actually wanted very much. Originally, when Tanya was printed, the Alter Rebbe very much wanted that it should be printed for Yutas Kislev. So the Rebbe wants to connect the Geula of Yutas Kislev to the Tanya. That is, even though the Tanya was actually printed, again, 2 years before the Geula of Yutas Kislev, the Tanya was printed in Tavkuf Nun Zayin. The Geula is in Tavkuf Nun Tes. Nevertheless, the Chiddush, the whole novelty of Tanya, specifically compared to other Maimarim of Chassidus, is specifically connected to the Chiddush of Yutas Kislev. The Rebbe actually points out in the Ha'ara over here, the Rebbe brings from Torah Shalom, that although the Tanya was written before Petrogorg, but the style of Tanya is already like the Inyanim that happened after Petrogorg. So the Rebbe wants to connect the Geula of Yutas Kislev with the idea of Tanya. Says the Rebbe will understand this based on a Pizgum of our Rabbeim, Rabbi Seinu Nisienu, that the Tanya is the Torah Shebeksav of Torah Chassidus. So what does it mean that it's Torah Shebeksav? Says the Rebbe, simply we understand it's Torah Shebeksav of Torah Chassidus. Why is that? It's not only because the Alter Rebbe himself wrote it, so it's Ksav, the Alter Rebbe wrote it, as opposed to the other Maimarim of Chassidus, that the Alter Rebbe only said. It was Baal Peh, the Alter Rebbe said it verbally and it was written down by his Talmidim. This is actually similar, says the Rebbe, to the Torahs of the Mezritcher Magid and the Baal Shem Tov, which were also just written down by their disciples and not by them themselves. But that's not the only reason Tanya is called Torah Shebeksav. but rather the relationship or the connection between Tanya and the rest of Chassidus is similar to that of Torah Shebeksav compared to Torah Sheba'al Peh, as we will discuss. Says the Rebbe, the difference between Torah Sheba'al Peh and Torah Shebeksav is, and this is a difference that's also going to bring some practical differences in halakha b'poil, how you learn it. Because in Torah Shebeksav, even if you don't understand what you're learning, you're still being yotzei, you're still learning Torah. Whereas in Torah Sheba'al Peh, you actually must understand. So the difference between Torah Shebeksav and Torah Sheba'al Peh, again, is in Torah Sheba'al Peh, the most important thing is the understanding of what you're learning. It's not so important, the diuk being so precise in the words, the letters, the exact words and letters. Whereas in Torah Shebeksav, of course, we know every single letter must be written down accurately. And the most important thing is verbalizing, saying the words. And the Rebbe says a very interesting thing. The Rebbe says this is why this mainly happened, this concept of Torah Shebeksav mainly starts at Matan Torah. Even though they learned Torah before Matan Torah. As the Gemara says, the Avis always learned Torah. In fact, there was even Torah written down by them. The Rambam writes that Avraham Avinu wrote Sforim, publicizing about Hashem. And he gave it over and told it to Yitzchak, etc. But nevertheless, it still didn't have the Geder. It's not called Torah Shebeksav. The idea of Torah Shebeksav starts after Matan Torah. Why is that? So it all goes back to what we were speaking about before. Since before Matan Torah there was the Gzeira between the Elyonim and Tachtoinim, that the Elyonim cannot come down below the Tachtoinim, could not go up above. The same thing was true regarding Torah itself. There's the Elyon, the Ruchnius of Torah, that's the understanding of Torah. But that Elyon, that spiritual part of Torah, was not able to descend into the Tachtoin. To be written down in a sefer that it should become a holy object, that couldn't happen. It's only after this Gzeira was bottled. Then now Elyonim could come down to Tachtoinim, so Torah also came down into the world of action. Torah Shebeksav. As it says, Kimu, Hashem himself wrote, engraved in the Aseres HaDibros and Luchos, and so to a Sefer Torah. When you're holding a Sefer Torah or the like, then it's considered you're holding, when a person takes an oath, it's supposed to be B'nekitas Chayfetz, you're holding a holy object, which is a Sefer Torah. And at the same time, we don't say it's Chas V'Sholem like a Yerida, a descent in the Torah, but rather we're saying as the Torah came down into the world of action, into the writing, it's still Michtav Elikim, it's Hashem's writing. Again, this is the Chibur, the combination, the connection between Elyon and Tachton. Says the Rebbe, the same thing is true with Tanya, with the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe wrote it in a way that every single letter is betachlis adiyuk, very, very accurate and precise. As the Frierdiker Rebbe related, that the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya over a period of 20 years, and he was subtracting and being medayik, being precise in every single word until he finally completely refined it in a way that there shouldn't be an extra letter, a missing letter, etc. And also when the Alter Rebbe gave over the Tanya to print, he begged the printer to be very, very medayik, to be very careful in checking over that there shouldn't be an extra or missing letter. Says the Rebbe, this idea that Pnimiyus HaTorah, the deepest secrets of Torah, are coming down all the way into the Oisiyus Shebeksav, into the letters, into the words, is the same idea. It's one with the concept of Yutas Kislev, which we explained before. The idea of Yutas Kislev is Yafutzum and Chutza, that the deepest secrets of the Torah, the well springs of the Torah, are coming all the way to Chutza. Says the Rebbe, another point, just like by Torah Shebeksav. So it's not only does it include all of Torah Sheba'al Peh. We know Leka Midid Lo Yermizah B'Raisa, there's nothing that's not hinted in the Torah. So everything of Torah Sheba'al Peh that's going to be revealed later is in Torah Shebeksav. But not only what's going to be revealed later, but also it includes the inyanim of Torah that they learned before Matan Torah. Torah would include and into those things as well. So too is regarding Sefer HaTanya, that in it is included all of the inyanim of Torah Chassidus, also the things that the Alter Rebbe would have revealed before writing the Tanya. And furthermore, the Rebbe says, since the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid didn't write down their Torah, it was all the way of Torah Sheba'al Peh written down by their Talmidim. So with Torah's Chassidus Chabad, the Alter Rebbe brought the inyanim of Chassidus HaKlolis into Havana V'Hasaga, into understanding, starting with the Sefer HaTanya. So therefore, in Sefer HaTanya, really is being brought down B'Ksav, in writing, even the inyanim of Torah's Chassidus HaKlolis, of the general Chassidus of the Baal Shem Tov and the Mezritcher Maggid. The Rebbe concludes from all of this we understand the tremendous inyan of learning Tanya, Torah Shebeksav of Torah Chassidus, that through this learning, together with all of Chassidus, we are Zoiche B'Karav to learn the Torah Shel Mashiach, which its inyan is Pnimiyus HaTorah, the secrets of the Torah, as Rashi says. Soita Mel, Mr. Tzvenesel, the secrets of the Torah, we're going to learn from the mouth of Mashiach, B'Meheira, V'Yameinu Mamash.